Today I am diving into baking with Brian Lagerstrom's no mixer required cinnamon rolls. I'm really excited to try these. I am not a baker, but here is all the ingredients you need. I'm going to put them down below. I'm just following Brian's recipe here, so all props to him. All of this is him. But you need a stick of butter, 225 grams of Greek yogurt, 115 grams of milk, 7 grams of instant yeast. You need 100 grams of sugar, 2 grams of baking soda, 450 grams of flour, and then 8 grams of salt. We're going to melt that butter down in the pan, so that's why we have it over there, and we are going to mix into this pan the Greek yogurt and the milk. So first, we're going to get that butter nice and melted. Keep this at a fairly low heat. You don't want this to really exceed right around 90 degrees Fahrenheit per Brian's recipe. Once we get that melted down nicely, I'm going to cut the heat completely, and we are going to throw in the Greek yogurt. After mixing that briefly, I'm going to pour in the milk and now mix this and allow it to cool. Mine at the moment is definitely a little bit hot, so I leave this off the heat for a few minutes to let it cool down. It can screw up the gluten formation if you don't let that come to the right temperature. As I check it here, you can see I'm a little over 100 degrees, so we need to let this cool down about 10 degrees, and then we'll be good to go. Once we get to that point, though, we're going to throw this into a big bowl. That way we could start to make the dough. This is the base of the dough. This is the liquid. Everything gets mixed into this. So pouring this into the bowl is also going to help me cool it down, which is also a benefit. I'm not a baker, so this is my first real foray into this. We're going to throw in that instant yeast right now, mix it around, and allow it to hydrate a bit. I think you can use regular yeast if you want, but it takes longer. I'm not totally sure of how the whole bread fermentation totally works. Very new to this, but it works. We're going to now add in all that flour. We're also going to add in the sugar, the baking soda, and the salt. Once you get that all added together, we're just going to start to mix this. You're going to form kind of a shaggy dough, very similar to how I've made other doughs before, or even making pasta. The overall process is the same, but don't overwork it at this stage. We're going to have time to let it really develop, but just mix it, let it become a nice shaggy dough. Let the solids mix with the liquid that you poured in there first. Here's kind of where you start to get. This is a nice, entry point into starting to mix it a little more aggressively. I'm going to pour it out. Brian does it all in the bowl, but I kind of just want to get my hands involved and just make sure everything's incorporated well here. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it works overall. And then once I get this kind of more formed into a shape, I'm going to put it back into the bowl and continue the process there. But it was having a hard time doing this all in the bowl. I'll also try to get some stuff from the sides here. That way we're not really short on ingredients. But obviously baking, you want to make sure you're using everything. But forming a nice tight ball here, and then I'm just going to cover the lid and we're going to let this sit for 15 minutes. After those 15 minutes, we're going to come back and we're going to now knead this again for a good 3 or 4 minutes. This allowed the gluten to start to develop a little bit, become a little less break apart and a little more stretchy. You want your dough to be nice and stretchy. So working this for another 3 or 4 minutes gives it that nice stretch, as you can see there. And now I'm going to throw this back into the bowl. If yours breaks at that point, you got to keep mixing it or let it wait a little bit longer. But we're going to throw this back into the bowl, form it into a ball and ball with my New York accent. Very difficult to say together. And then we're going to recover this and we're going to let that sit for 75 minutes, hour and 15 minutes. And you're going to be good. In that time period, right towards the end, you don't want to make this too early, but you need some room temperature butter, and we're going to make the cinnamon sugar mix. This is what goes inside your cinnamon roll. It is a full stick of butter. Then you also have 150 grams of brown sugar and 20 grams of cinnamon. Add a little bit of salt in there as well. I did that off camera into the bowl of brown sugar. And then just mix that together. You can really if you need to use your hands here, I did. It kind of helps it. My butter wasn't as soft as I wanted just because it's a little cooled out still. But once you do that, you want to try to really cream it a bit. If you did this in a mixer, it would be much easier. But the whole point of this is to do it without a mixer. So just keep kind of whipping it almost. You're making kind of a whipped interior here, but this will help the butter not separate when you melt it down. But now let's roll this. Get a little bit of flour out onto your table. Obviously, if you want more detailed and a prettier recipe, this is my style. Go watch Brian's video. I'm going to link it in the description, but real big fan of his content, and he makes phenomenal videos, and this recipe was also phenomenal. So huge shout out to him. But now we're just going to start to roll this out. The goal here is to get about a little less than 1/4 of an inch, close to 1/8 of an inch thick layer of the dough, and almost kind of a long rectangular shape. That way, as you roll it, it's kind of in a nice log. And there's my face. Sorry, everyone. Normally try to keep that out of these videos, but trying some new angles. This is as rectangular as I was able to get it. I don't think it's an issue, and it didn't turn out to be an issue. It just left me with a little extra space on the sides. And now we're going to throw in the cinnamon sugar filling, and you're going to evenly coat this. You want to kind of spread it nicely. Don't push too hard that you break the dough. Keep more of a back and forth motion rather than a downward forced motion. And then try to cover as much as you can. I'm going to leave a little towards the edges not covered, so as I roll it, I can cut those off and not waste too much of the cinnamon sugar, but cover as much as you physically can. That's as far as I was able to get. Before, it felt like it was getting too light in certain areas, but now it's time to roll these. I was a little worried about that step, and it was actually shockingly easy. Basically, we're going to start here by just rolling over the edge and kind of crimping itself down to get it started, and then that's the process you continue to follow. Roll it about an inch, crimp it into itself. Here's the view from the other side. You can do it tighter than this also, which will help it kind of, rise upwards when you're baking it. I don't get super tight, and also you'll see I have an issue with my pan later that stops it from really kind of moving upwards instead of outwards, but roll it, kind of press it tight. When you get to the end, roll over that seam, and then you're good to go. We're just going to start cutting these up into cinnamon rolls. Start by kind of cutting off the edge. Make sure you have a sharp knife also. Cutting through dough is very difficult with a dull knife, but look at how beautiful that looks. Cutting it now in half, we're going to cut these each side into 3 rolls. So this whole recipe makes about 6 large-sized rolls. And there you go. That's exactly what you have. Each one is about 2 inches thick, which is a perfect thickness for these rolls. Brian cooks them in a muffin pan, but I'm going to cook them in kind of a loaf pan here, or a double-sized loaf pan. Butter that up nicely. The reason I wanted to do it in the larger loaf pan is because I kind of like the softer interior cinnamon rolls and not too hard, and I felt like they would get a little too crispy in the muffin pan. But noticing at this point as I fill them in that I'm going to be a little short on cinnamon rolls because this pan is a little larger than what I have. So we're going to use those ends to kind of help fill it in. But if you're going to do this, just make sure you have enough. You may want a whole another roll of the cinnamon rolls, but it works out fine. This is just why they kind of cook sideways and expand rather than up. But then we're going to cover this in tin foil, and we're going to throw it in a 375-degree oven for 35 minutes. At the 35-minute point, we're going to open it up. We're going to check on it. They look exactly like they should, and we're going to uncover it at this point, and we're going to let it cook for another 10 or 15 minutes until the tops get browned. As you can see, they didn't really rise. They kind of expanded sideways, but here they are after another 10 or 15 minutes. They look absolutely beautiful. We're going to take them out. We're going to throw them onto just a wire rack. We're going to take them out of the pan shortly. I do that off camera because it was a little complicated, but that allows them to just continue cooling. And now we're going to make that icing. It is cream cheese, 25 grams of it, 75 grams of heavy cream, and then 150 grams of powdered sugar. A little bit of salt in here as well. I omitted that because I don't think it really needs it, and I don't really like that taste in my icing, but mix it all together, and you're good to go. You will see shortly that I also add a little more cream and a little water to loosen this up, so kind of gauge it to the level of thickness that you're looking for. Right when you throw that powdered sugar in, it's going to look like it gets real kind of tight. Push through it, and you're going to see it starts to become more and more like icing, but I think this is a little too thick. I like my icing a little looser, especially when spreading it on things. So I add a little more cream, and even at that point, I think it is a little bit too thick still. So we add in just a splash of water. It was about 10 grams. Mix that together, and to me, that's the perfect icing consistency. You can keep it thicker if you want. You can go even thinner if you want. But at this point, I'm going to throw it into a Ziploc bag and just make a makeshift piping bag. Now, as you can see, I've emptied out those cinnamon rolls. I kind of did like a bunt. I poured them upside down onto a plate and then back right side up, and that works perfectly rather than trying to get them out with any sort of spatula. And now I'm just going to kind of follow the seams, pop out a cinnamon roll of any size. That middle one is the one I want, but I'm not going to go and be a monster and cut into that. And then just throw that onto a plate, ice it up, and you're good to go. See, they obviously from being in the pan are going to have one flat side. If you cook them in a muffin, they would be nice, that typical round shape, but it doesn't really matter. I like the consistency, the nice soft inners here with the crispy outsides. That's the benefit of using the kind of loaf pan. And I'm going to reward myself with that inner piece. Everyone knows the inner part of the cinnamon bun is the best. So right away, I'm just going to grab that part for myself. Throw a little extra icing on it. And there you go. Brian, this recipe was absolutely fantastic. I strongly recommend go check out his video.